And we're live.
And I'd like to say a big welcome to our ACCE Learning Network Hangout. This is Series 4, Episode 29 for 2014. G'day, Amanda.
G'day, Roland.
It's a place we can connect and network with our PLN.
And as usual, if you're watching us live, you can post a question to our panel by going to todaysmeet.com/ACCELN, and on Twitter you can use the hashtag ACCELN.
And I'm Roland Gesthuizen, high school teacher, e-learning leader in Victoria, Australia. I'm also a member of the DLTV. And it's been an amazing week. I've got this surge of life back in me again. The reports are behind me, Amanda.
Yay!
We're changing things around next year, and I want to have this sort of monolithic cycle of accession and depression every 6 months in a high school as I reach back and start typing up these reports. As we do, as we handcraft each one like a potato chip from an entire potato. I've been also busy running training weekends for the Scouts and having a bit of fun trying to catch up with all of my emails since I've been sick. So all back on deck now.
Quite an adventure. Congratulations on finishing your reports. I'm not to brag, but I've now, all the students and teachers have left, so it's just me and a few others, and I'm going to head off for some holiday fun soon. So yay, even better. And I'm Amanda Rablin. I'm an e-learning coordinator in Brisbane and proud QSite member. And we have some other wonderful guests with us, one from across the ditch, and we also have our famous regular, very famous panel member as well. So we'll start with you, Dr. Jason Zagami.
Good evening all. My name's Jason and I'm a lecturer at Griffith University on the Gold Coast.
And president of ACCE as well. Very important role.
Absolutely.
And our guest from New Zealand, who it is rather late, and it's his wedding anniversary, so he's hanging out with us after going out to a fancy dinner. I know, we must be special. So, Professor Tim Bell, do you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Tim Bell. I'm based in Christchurch, New Zealand. Just a little shout out there, New Zealand. Been involved in the Computer Science Unplugged project and also a whole lot of curriculum changes. So, yeah.
Fabulous, lots of fun. So tonight we're going to showcase some of your amazing work supporting the development of computer science in New Zealand schools.
Yeah.
I've been following Tim's work for quite some time, and it's been really a pleasure to talk to him tonight, especially on your wedding anniversary. Hey, Tim, before I forget, if you were to jump on a canoe and actually go west about 2,000 kilometres and cross the international date line, you could actually extend that honeymoon a bit longer, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, you've got a romantic idea. Yeah.
Oh, look, I did that on my engagement. We made it last for about 36 hours by flying to Europe. It's an awesome strategy. It really drags it out, though. Could you tell us how computer science has evolved as a subject area in New Zealand schools?
Oh, right. So I guess that basically things just got so bad that something had to be done. Around about 2008, there was a whole lot of work done to try and improve, computing in schools, and inevitably a lot of it sort of centered around training students to be users. And there's the old saying that there are only two industries that they call their customers users, and so us, and the other one you're not meant to train people for, see. But the schools were really getting into the curriculum was being developed. And it just kept on focusing on training people to be users and so on, even with some proposed changes. And so a couple of reports came out. They were quite damning reports, actually. I mean, one of them used a phrase, something like, the changes that were happening were like painting over flaking paint work on rotten timber or something like that. And so anyway, they kind of got the attention of the Ministry of Education, and they said, well, what should we do? And a review group got together, and it was people from, myself from representing universities and Polytech and industry and so on all got together, and I think they probably thought we'd be arguing for quite a while when you get a group together like that, but everyone said this is just so important, we just got to do something. And within a couple of years, the curriculum was designed and up and running, and we had this incredible window of opportunity when there were enough people in the Ministry of Education who understood what was going on, and enough support from industry and so on to actually make stuff happen. And so 2011, there was a computer science, and by computer science I mean real computer science. So there was programming, there was concepts like algorithms and interface evaluation and artificial intelligence and just all sorts of things that computer scientists are interested in. So that ended up in schools, 2011, and that was gradually phased in. It's for the last 3 years of school, and the last lot was phased in 2013.
So actually about a decade's worth of thinking has gone into this.
Well, it feels like it, but it only took a couple of years, and I mean, we're still getting on our feet in some ways, because it was, I mean, a lot of the supporting information was released 6 months into the time that schools were actually teaching the material, which is, so, you know, the early adopting teachers had to be really quick on their feet. And of course, the other thing is, at the beginning of 2011, when it came in, wasn't a good time for Christchurch. We had the major earthquake in February, and yet that's where most of the Teachers Association leaders were, and you know, here at Canterbury we were doing a lot of the support. So it was a pretty rocky start, but I think everyone just really rolled up their sleeves and just said this is too important to let it go, and so, you know, we got it done.
It sounds like the passion of the people involved really kind of made it happen. Were there any other challenges you encountered? Like you mentioned the culture of being a user of technology rather than someone creating or programming new things with computer science. Has that been something you've broken down? Is that a challenge?
It's a challenge, but it is gradually breaking down. I mean, the first group that really understood that were the teachers, and you know, there's relatively little support available for the teachers, because, you know, even to this day, we still get principals and counsellors and administrators basically saying, look, we've just bought a bunch of iPads for the school, so we're obviously doing computer science. And yeah, I know. And we've now trained up, you know, sort of, well, literally hundreds of teachers, and so they would know exactly how to answer that. But, you know, with administrators, it's a bit harder to, you know, they tend to just gloss over the surface a wee bit. So, you know, that's been a bit of a challenge, because the biggest challenge has been to get the teachers up to speed. And fortunately, we had the CS for HS, the very first one was available in 2011, and we kind of just made that basically as like, if you're a teacher, we'll tell you just what you need to know to be able to teach the new stuff. I mean, I think 11% of our teachers have a qualification in computer science, the ones that are teaching it. So, and just over half of them had any kind of qualification in computing at all. So, you know, many have come from being a typing teacher to being a word processing teacher to being a commerce teacher, to suddenly have to teach programming and algorithms and formal languages and, you know, goodness knows what. So for them, we were surprised how many of them really took it on, actually. Because the other thing is the average or median age of teachers, of digital technology teachers in New Zealand is well over 50, around about 54 or something like that. And so we thought probably a lot of them will just want to retire, but a lot of them are actually just saying, no, this is really interesting. It's great that someone's prepared to teach me something new, and finally they're getting some respect from the kids too, because when you're teaching PowerPoint for the third time to, you know, 17-year-olds, it's kind of not that much fun anyway. So, but now, you know, the local industry are you know, giving them a lot of love, and you know, we've had the first batch of students coming through. We've got some really passionate students coming through as well, which is pretty cool. We ran a CS for HS last week, and we had 7 final year students, all girls from 2 different schools, who said, I'd like to come and help at this conference for the teachers, voluntarily paid their own way to be there, and just came to, we got them to speak, you know, for a few minutes to the teachers, but mainly they were just hanging out and making the cups of tea and all that sort of stuff, but they just wanted to make sure that all the other teachers would, you know, get up to speed on this thing. So yeah, there's all these pockets of people who have become really passionate, including high school students themselves. Yeah. Brilliant.
Were there other resources and experiences that were created for students and teachers, or was it something that more organically evolved?
Yeah, I mean, the number one source of professional development was, we've done a lot of surveys of the teachers, and the main source has been the national mailing list. So there's a few hundred teachers, I think, on a mailing list, and it's turned into quite a positive atmosphere, and people share resources and what they've done and how to deal with, you know, all the different things they have to do. And then at the same time, we built up a list. because there's sort of no books on high school computer science particularly that match what we were doing, and so we built up a list. In fact, we found 7,000 resources, little URLs and web pages and videos and things like that, and we put them up. This is back in 2011, which is a bit naive because you give 7,000 resources to a teacher and they just go, I don't know where to start. And exactly. So we put up the top 10, and even with the top 10, it was still like, what do I do with it? How do I use it? And so on. So the thing that grew out of that is what we call the Computer Science Field Guide. And with the Field Guide, we basically just put every topic that's in the standards, we call them, it's the curriculum, and exactly at the level that's needed, and sort of presented in a way that hopefully means something to a teenager. And so that's evolved, and in fact, just a couple of months ago, we just put the last chapter in. So it's open source, it's free, and people can download it and update it and add to it if they want. But it's mainly teachers just use it as is. They just want something they can get on with.
Tim, it's wonderful to hear how you've crowdsourced an entire country to help develop this resource and learning experience. I wonder if it's a good opportunity to have a look at it, if you don't mind, so we can showcase some of the work you've done with the field guide. Do you want to have a go at it?
Yeah, sure. I'll see if I can persuade it to come up here. If I can find it.
And I'll just add the link to our today's Meet page for the viewers as well.
Right. There's one thing about being the Unplugged guys, you don't always... here we go. Good at the computer thing. Okay, so the field guide, it's sort of here slightly in mobile mode, I think, but it's we'll start at the beginning. So each of these topics is covered in the standards that students do, and so, for example, if you go to the algorithms chapter, and it's probably a lot better if people just look at this themselves, each chapter eventually will start with a video, and it's kind of a humorous one. So this one here, in fact, this one was largely written by Caitlin, who's in the picture there. That was her honours project. So, a lot of this has been developed by students, and she designed and made this video, which is basically searching a library by looking through every single book on the shelf. So that guy in the background is going through every single book on the shelf, and then someone else is doing it a much more intelligent way. And just basically, that's a chance to talk as a teaser to say, look, obviously this is a dumb algorithm, and it's the same on computers. And then there's lots of interactives and things in here. So, in this one here, kids can... one of the things that we're really big on is constructivism. So we don't tell people how to do things, but we just, for example, say, hey, look, here's a lot of boxes. Try and find the one that's got a certain value inside it, and they're all out of order. So students effectively have to do a sequential search. But then here we say, well, here's a bunch of boxes, and it gets up to dozens and dozens of boxes, and they're in sorted order from the smallest to the largest. Try and find this particular one, and we find that students will naturally use some kind of binary search. But the real message is not knowing binary search or something like that. It's actually being able to figure out that if you double the number of boxes, you'll end up only taking one more step, and it's that's the real power of the binary search algorithm is you can make things massively bigger, and it only takes a little bit longer. So there's just a little sample of it, but we've got quite a few videos in there. There's quite a few that we still need to add. But and a lot of interactives where students can, we want them to try and experience, the actual problem that we're solving, or the problem, or the thing that we're talking about. The interface one's cool. Actually, you should have a go at that. It's full of horrible interfaces. It may be a little frustrating, but the whole goal is to point out to students why interface design is important.
I particularly like the way that you've built this around students, and built this with students, and built this with an audience of students. Sometimes we lose that when we're in the business of teacher education, and we're just getting the teachers up to speed, and then they're scrabbling for the resources. Did you draw upon the idea of this from that larger community, or was it just a goal that you had at the very start, that you wanted to have a resource that teachers could use directly for teaching?
Yeah, well, I think the idea came about as we realised that just giving a bunch of links to teachers wasn't good enough. But also to some extent, because I've been involved with the Unplugged project for a while, which was aimed at primary schools, and I'd always had in the back of my mind, what would you do if a kid was on their own, if they, and also perhaps an older kid, and so sort of a whole lot of things came together and that made for the field guide. I was also working with Peter Denning in America, and Peter, he was the president of ACCELN, and he's been very involved in outreach and designing things for education and so on. And the actual name field guide came from him. He said what we need is field guides for people so that they can get into computer science, and we need a field guide for primary school, well, elementary kids they call over there, which actually, he said, a bit Unplugged is kind of that, so that's done. And we need one for high school kids. And so, you know, it was all kind of coming together, and so we just got on and did it. It's only about, we could probably put twice as much into it still. You know, there's missing videos, they've got lots of ideas for interactive stuff in that, but that's the sort of thing that we want to try and source now. You know, it'd be a good student project now that we know what interactive we need somewhere. A student could do that, for example. I'll just give a quick shout out. Almost half of the text in this has been written by one of my ex-students, Heidi Newton. She's actually over as an intern in Sydney at the moment, but hopefully we'll get her to do some more work. But she's been prolific in producing material for it. But there's, if you look at the acknowledgements, there's already about probably 30 or 40 people who have contributed something to this, which is pretty cool.
Mm. I love the videos, and that's often I noticed a way that students seem to prefer to work in my classroom. If it has a nice comical line, or it's funny, something they can relate to. Even movie trailers I'm actually able to use now sometimes of teaching ideas.
Mm. Yeah, and one of the principles of the...
Sorry, I was just going to say, I love the quirkiness and the metaphor that's kind of in a lot of them too. It's very cool. I can imagine it would inspire students if they were to create their own, to think of what are the humorous elements I can use to explain this concept.
Yeah, and I think, humour is really important in education too. And as people say, just having fun, but it's not. Education is about engagement, and that's the bottom line. Is if a kid gets engaged and they want to find out more and they're figuring out what's going on, and humour is a great method of engagement. You can't be having a laugh, non-stop for the whole time, but it's really good for getting them hooked in. And the thing with computer science too is there is so much humour in it because we deal with ridiculously big numbers, and humour is about exaggeration, and we deal with things that are the opposite of what you might expect. And we've got things like algorithms that go, sorting algorithm. One of our best sorting algorithms goes slow if you give it a sorted input. What's with that, so it's just, we kind of have fun, and so we have these brainstorming sessions where we think, well, what is it about this algorithm or this problem or this technique or this situation that would go wrong if we didn't know the computer science behind it? And often that leads to quite a humorous sort of situation anyway. Not so funny when it's actually happening to you. The interface chapter is quite painful, and you can have a laugh a minute watching people with it, but I think people have probably taken it out physically on their computers in real life if they've hit bad interfaces. Yeah.
I remember that my daughter came in. She's in primary school, and she said there were two types of people in the world. There are those that can extrapolate from incomplete data. And it took me a while to realize this was a geek joke that she'd somewhere picked up, and she was rattling off, and this cheeky grin on her face. So I had a bit of fun looking up some other ones and various geek T-shirts. But it is a way of breaking the ice. It personalizes it, and I think when people can see that, they begin to see perhaps some of the culture that sits behind IT.
Yeah.
I really did like that algorithms one. Do you mind if I actually play that, if I can, Amanda?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Computer Science Field Guide Algorithms commercial, because I think there's a leaf that we can take out of that book for perhaps some of the other resources that we make in Australia. Can I throw that one?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, are you going to play it, or?
I'm going to play it now. So if I can just quickly screen share this one, Amanda.
Yep, that sounds good.
Let you grab the camera, and I'll hit play when you're ready.
We use computers to do hundreds of different tasks every day. Things like searching the internet, editing an image, or finding a route on a map. But have you ever wondered how a computer figures out how to do these things? An algorithm is a step-by-step process which tells a computer how to do a specific task. But there can be many different algorithms for the same problem, kind of like how there can be many different recipes for baking a cake. But as we know, some recipes can be a lot better than others. So we're going to do a little experiment to see if the same thing is true for algorithms. Here we are in front of the University of Canterbury Library, about to start the great algorithms race. Competing today we have Speedy Spencer and Slow Coach Slade. Their task is to run to the library and find this book by Knuth amongst the millions of books in there. First one to find it wins. Are you ready? Go!
They look like some of my IT students.
Spencer! Speedy Spencer is off to a flying start. He's searched dozens of books already. He seems to be employing a sequential search algorithm, so he looks at the first book and then continues on and looks at each individual book until he... Where's he going? He seems to know exactly what he's looking for.
Some expensive camera work there.
Slade seems to be employing something like a binary search algorithm as his strategy. He's looked at a book at the centre of the library, and by looking at that one book, he's realised the book he's looking for can't be in the first half. So by making one query, he's eliminated half of the books in the library. He may be slow, but he's intelligent. Spencer seems to have almost finished his first shelf of books. He's got a few thousand more to go though before he finds the right book. It's a bit like if you took one of the world's fastest computers and gave it one of the world's worst algorithms. Imagine if a fast engine like Google returned results to you by searching through every page on the internet one by one. Now back to Slade. How are you going, Slade?
Exactly as I planned. Note it down and should be on this shelf.
You already know that the book is on this shelf?
This half the shelf.
I love the
Excuse me.
Bozo, are you searching for the book as well?
Yep, I'm doing a bozo search.
How does that work?
Well, I take a book and hopefully it's the right book.
But what if it isn't the right book?
Well, then I'll go look for another book. Excuse me.
Congratulations, Slade, you've won! Guys, you can stop searching now. Guys. Slade's found the book. Guys, you can stop searching now. Slade's won. Guys, you can stop now.
Stuck it in indefinite.
So it looks like the algorithm you choose can make a big difference, particularly with large amounts of data. You see, if the library had been twice the size, it would take Speedy Spencer twice as long to find the book, but Slow Coach Slade would have only needed to check one extra book. In this chapter, we'll be looking more at what algorithms are used for and why it's important to choose the right one. So, Slow Coach Slade, if you were an algorithm in a program I was writing, I would be the happiest programmer alive.
Yes! Found it! Bozo, what are you reading? Oh, it's a book on metagenetics in Argentina and Peru.
Thank you. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing with those is I tend to let the students go with it when they've got ideas for it, and they're a bit closer in age to the kids that are going to be watching it, so we get some pretty wacky stuff that way.
But it starts to make you think about all sorts of extensions of that analogy and other questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that was done too, of course, is when Caitlin did it for a project, she actually had a list of about half a dozen or more analogies that could be used, and we sort of explored all the humorous options for each one, and then sort of narrowed in on the one that was going to sort of have the most possibilities and so on. Yeah, but you're right. There's I mean, one analogy that I mean, don't get stuck on algorithms because there's that's 1/14 of the topics that we cover. But another thing we do, and it's just there's a teacher guide hidden inside the field guide. So there's a link there where you can ask for permission to get access to it because it's got answers in it, so we don't students just looking at it. But one of the things we suggest for teachers is the phone book search, where we literally rip the phone book in half and then half again and so on, which It turns out to be quite memorable when the teacher rips up a phone book in front of you. But the other thing is you can ask questions. Well, what about the Auckland phone book will be twice as big. How many more rips are there? And the answer is, well, just one more for twice as big and so on. So really reinforcing that. Yeah.
So there's a use for all those useless books people keep delivering me with phone numbers in them when I can find them much quicker on my phone or computer.
Yeah. I get given all the old ones that people get. So the trouble is,
collecting mine now.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you another trick. I've got a friend who's a bookbinder, and we took one phone book and we cut the spine off it and shuffled the pages and then bound it back. And I often give it to a class or someone and just say, find my phone number in here, and they can't. Well, they can, but it would be a linear search. And again, that really brings home the idea of how long it takes if you have an unsorted list and you have to search it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
One of the problems we had in Victoria was actually coming to terms with some of these words, because the definitions that we use in IT are sometimes very different from what the community actually accepts, and we've also got a role in being able to communicate that. Algorithm was an alien word to everybody except perhaps someone with a computer science background or maths background, but now we begin to embrace it right across the curriculum, and there's some unique challenges with that, unpacking the actual meaning and definition. How did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge, and it's not. I mean, the definitions. There are lots of words and there's lots of jargon, and certainly I think it's been a challenge for teachers because some of them will say, look, can you just say that again in plain English or something like that? And one of the phrases that I found really useful as we've been training teachers is one that I got off a girl who would have been about 9 years old. So I was doing an unplugged session probably 10 years ago almost with a bunch of kids, and this girl put her hand up and she said, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Why do you use such big words for such simple ideas?" And I thought that was really cool, and it's become a bit of a theme for the teachers, is big words for simple ideas. So yes, there's binary search, there's binary numbers, and there's algorithms, and there's quick sort, and there's HCI and formal languages and all that sort of stuff, and finite state automaton. But each of those things is actually a relatively simple concept, and the challenge for us is to present it in a way that, in 5 or 10 minutes you can have an experience with that. And we usually do it backwards. So we'll say, look, with finite state automaton, for example, here's the treasure map, find your way around the treasure map. That's from the Unplugged series. And then at the end, the kids have drawn things with circles and arrows and letters on them, and you say, well, actually in computer science, that thing is called a finite state automaton. And they go, oh, okay, that's all right, yeah. That's my big word for today. But they've already got over the concept. Whereas I think if you say up front, today we're going to do finite state automaton, then it's like, oh, it's obviously going to be hard because it's a big word and I have never heard of it and things like that. Yeah.
That's a worry, isn't it, that we somehow turn something which could be quite exciting and engaging into something really dry, like week 5 we're doing network protocols followed by artificial intelligence. It's got to be more than it's just a series of labels and slides in a slideshow.
Yeah. Yeah, the question is always what would go wrong in a teenager's world if that thing wasn't going, and at that point you can start to show them things that are right under their noses that they probably didn't even realize that they were relying on for their MP3 player to work, or for them to be able to Skype or tweet or whatever it is. Yeah.
Did you find while you were constructing the guide that you were actually coming up with some of your own words, or things became a lot clearer yourself when you had a chance to sort of reflect upon that?
Oh, I mean, this is the thing I love about writing all this stuff, is I actually start to understand these things that I've been teaching for decades. And just like, why do we teach it? And that's always the question, is why should anyone care about this? And especially, I mean, with a university student, that's fine. They've enrolled for computer science. They want a job that will probably pay really well. So just suck it in and learn it. We can get away with that to some extent. But, I mean, the whole reason that we want computer science in the high schools is not that we want computer scientists coming out of high schools. We want students to know what computer science is. The biggest problem we had is that the definition of computer science. And I used to do this, I still do this often, go into a school and say, what do you think computer science is? And if you didn't get total blank looks, you'd just get kids saying, I don't know, fix computers, or eat pizza, or, I mean, seriously, those are some of the best answers I got. But normally, just no clue as to what it was and how their entire world had been turned upside down by ideas from computer science. And so the goal of having in the curriculum is just really so that they come out going, I kind of know what computer science is, and it's actually a little bit more interesting than I thought it was. Or, and I don't mind this at all, if they go, actually, and I've literally heard this phrase from a parent, the kid likes computers, but they don't like computer science. And I think that's fine if they find that out, because we get enough kids turning up in our computer science degrees who like computers but probably don't like computer science, and it's not good for them to be there, and it's not much fun for us either. But I get so many the other way around, and particularly I've had so many girls who have come through who say, look, I got into this by accident. I had to take a computer science class, or I was sitting in the class with my boyfriend, and I thought I'd hate it. And I really enjoyed it. And why didn't someone tell me about this? And why didn't I find out at school? And why don't more people know about it? So a lot of the goal is just simply to expose students to the idea of it. So we don't need to go into a lot of depth in school. And the other key thing is we really want them to have a positive experience with it. It's like, look, here's some cool ideas. Let's dig into what's here and explore them, rather than, you have to know this, this, and this, and it'll be in the exam, and maybe it'll be useful one day.
Tim, how's the uptake been of the changes to the curriculum in terms of the number of schools offering courses in computer science, particularly in the lower years? Has there been a significant uptake?
Right. So I'll give you a few stats in a minute, but just to be clear, so the standards that we got in are just for the last 3 years of high school, which is the qualifications. But the effect that's been happening, of course, is that once teachers get comfortable with that, they start teaching it a year or two earlier. So it's gradually filtering down. So it's only just starting to get to primary schools, and it's not part of the primary school curriculum. So it turns out that that's actually not too bad a way to do it. You might have thought filtering up would work, but it seems to be going okay that way. There are about 8 main standards that we're interested in that are computer science or programming, and one of those is used in, I think, a bit over 100 schools in New Zealand. Now, there's about 400 things called high schools in New Zealand, or secondary schools. About half of them are something that you would actually recognise as a secondary school. So, excuse me. So probably, about almost a half of the big schools are doing something serious. So, the glass is half full or half empty, depending how you want to look at it. In terms of the numbers of students, we've got a few thousand students who've done some kind of computer science, but the numbers are growing too, which is really good. So in terms of teachers, until last month, or in fact until last week, we'd interacted with maybe 150 teachers, and of those, I would say half of them had really got into it, and the other half were kind of just slowly getting into it. Last week we had 120 teachers here for a CS for HS day, and most of them were there for the first time ever. They hadn't taught computer science, they hadn't been to one before, and the feedback seems to indicate that they've gone away going, maybe I could have a go at this. There'll be a few that are going, that was a bit much for me. But so in terms of numbers of teachers, we're getting well into the hundreds. So that's, again, one teacher for every second school or so who will be quite enthusiastic. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. It feels like it's unstoppable now. Like if we stopped helping them and all that sort of stuff, we've got half the teachers, half the schools with teachers who basically are really enthusiastic. And they'll just push themselves along.
And is there any political drivers behind the uptake of computer science?
That's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of the changes came about because our national IT organisation, the IITP it's called, they were behind one of the initial reports that really sort of poked the government in the ribs and said, you better sort this out. And they've been very good at supporting us in Wellington and keeping it visible politically and that sort of thing. Within the Ministry of Education, it feels like, anytime we've had an official that really understands what's going on, they get promoted out of the way. And so it's been a little bit hard to get traction there. And that's why it's been a real grassroots thing. It's basically been the universities and the teachers trying to sort out things between themselves with a lot of support from industry. And in some ways that's not a bad thing, but it would be nice if the political system was kind of pushing the teachers along a wee bit as well. But that's something that we're working on.
So in an ideal world, sorry.
Just one more in terms of teacher education. is there broad consensus across the teacher education institutions to prepare teachers for computer science?
Well, short answer, not really, or not yet. The government they give incentives to the colleges of education to take on particular topics, and computer science is not on the list of things that there's a shortage of. Bizarrely, we still have had a few computer science graduates recently go through the colleges of ed, which is really heartening actually, because they could have gone off and got computer science jobs, but they've got a passion for teaching. We've been working on the colleges of ed, and I mean, my local one, I've been teaching a couple of courses for them, so we can actually do that because they're there, and I basically just offer to do it anyway. And there's one or two of the others are starting to pick it up, but they aren't getting the incentive from the government because again, that part of the government that gives them incentives is still trying to figure out. Because we've got the e-learning thing happening at the moment too, and that really muddies the water for everyone, because it's in fact, our Minister of Education was quoted recently when someone said, "Why don't you train these teachers in computer science?" And she said, "We've invested all these millions of dollars in e-learning, so yes, we've done it." And it's they can
use Word. It's okay.
All our brick walls are padded around here, so yeah.
That's kind of weird, isn't it? Because what would happen if you didn't train them and they ended up teaching computer science? That's kind of scary. I think your efforts, like you've been thwarting the plans of many teachers who'd like to keep maybe other teachers computer illiterate by being able to embrace that and engage with it. It sounds like you've got some really good traction there across the curriculum, that pedagogical shift of teachers thinking about how to embed this in the classroom.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very much driven by the teachers. In the end, they dictate what happens. So these standards, they're not compulsory. And so if they're not offered, they won't happen. And if no teacher brings it up, I think it was something like 8% of teachers said their management asked them to introduce computer science and programming. So 92% of the stuff that's happened is because the teacher thought it would be a good idea, and with or without the management's permission, just started teaching it. The thing is that our computing courses are made up of a whole lot of small components, and so this is a component that you can slip into a computing course. And some people have done it, and other teachers have slipped in some bits of it, and those that are not confident are probably putting it off for another day.
I'm curious what the penetration of computers are in school. Many running a one-to-one program, maybe some funding, moving out of the labs to maybe BYOD. What kind of models are you kind of finding popular?
Yeah, well, I mean, traditionally it's been a couple of computer labs for the school and people go and use it, but lately there's been a push for BYOD. A few schools have gone, completely BYOD. Generally, there's been a variety of schools that have done that, and others have gone somewhere in between. But one of the challenges there, and particularly, like I noticed this in the UK, that just whenever, when you say BYOD to a principal, they go, well, iPads, because iPads are cool and I can use one, and it makes the school look good. It's a terrible environment for learning to program on. I mean, programmers use huge double screens, not tiny little screens where half of it's taken up with a typewriter keyboard. And so, I mean, the good thing is that these things are so ridiculous that, it has to snap when people realize what's going on. It's not just a small shift. But one of the things that the New Zealand teachers are really watching out for is having the computer labs removed. So it's like we can free up a classroom because everyone's got iPads. Well, no, we need at least one lab so that people can go and do programming on a decent screen on a normal computer.
I was curious how you can actually sustain this change and continue to engage teachers with algorithmics and computational thinking. In the long run, it's going to be harder to try to keep it focused and keep it relevant. Or do you think that'll be easier because the language will be a lot more accessible to teachers and the real-world applications might be driven in part by students making connections?
Yeah, well, there's an element of that, and of course, by the way, parents are also really important because, I mean, if the parents want their kids to be doctors and lawyers, and we need to let them know that actually that's fine, but the IT guy is going to earn more and can work in any country without changing their qualification and so on. But the thing we're finding is that we've now built up, numbers of really confident teachers who know what they're doing, and peer support is the most convincing form of learning. And we've got people who were typing teachers and who were really unconfident and didn't understand this stuff, but they've embraced it and they've ripped into it, and they now feel confident, and so they're now great peers for the others because they've come from that place. One of the things we're doing now here is we're running pilots in primary schools. Well, when I say pilots, we've started with one school this year, and we're going to go to several schools next year. And we've deliberately chosen a teacher who's done nothing much in IT. She's very open-minded, and so she's the sort of person that afterwards you can be a role model for other teachers in terms of coming from nothing to being really enthusiastic and understand, being able to cope with it and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it sort of gets easier because as you get more and more teachers, they can support each other, and they've got good mechanisms for doing that. Local groups. One of the things that's really valuable is having sort of monthly meetings of a local group. And by the way, it's as much sort of social support and that sort of thing as much as anything. Just to help people, because there's a real fear that you'll get to a point where you just reach a roadblock. You don't know how to get going, and particularly if you're working with computers. If you just can't get it installed, if there's a bug in it, if it just won't work, then you've got nowhere that you can go. And so having peers and support and that sort of stuff makes a big difference. And online on the teacher group, you'll quite often have people saying things like, well, my version of this is expired or it doesn't work, what do I do? And someone else will say, oh, I've solved that, you have to hold this down and press that at the same time and pay $5 here or something like that. So yeah, the peer support from teachers, I mean, ultimately, my goal is to make myself redundant, so we get them all up to speed, and then we just sit back and let them look after each other. But the other big thing is to get the funding, so that the teachers funding, particularly to get time. Just time is the hard thing for teachers. And I don't know how it works over there, but we have a thing called a teacher release day, and for a couple of $100, you can get the teacher off work for the day. And the school will release them usually, and the teacher's happy to be released if you can fund that. If you don't, they have to bribe someone to look after their classes, or the school has to pay that kind of money to get someone to do it, and so on. And suddenly it has to be a real commitment rather than just something that falls into place naturally. So getting that sort of funding in place is really important, and that's one of the things that we've been active. And when I say we, people like the IITP and industry, and those of us who are sort of quite passionate about this, trying to support the teachers, is try and get the ministry, get the government to realise that this is something that a little bit of funding would go a long way.
It just needs enough of that seed funding to keep things along.
Yeah,
absolutely. We could crowdsource it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of the
sorry, you go.
Okay. I mean, one of the things we're realising is this change is possibly bigger than any other subject change that's happened in schools, because no one has taught computer science in New Zealand. I mean, there's been a bit of programming taught, but programming is just a part of what we're covering here. And so, I mean, what other subject has it not been in schools? I mean, you imagine if physics or maths was just not in schools, and then next year we're going to introduce it in every school in New Zealand. I mean, no one knows what maths is, but they'll figure it out. It's something it's a huge change. And that's what we've just done, and it's no wonder that we're almost halfway there, and it'll be a few years before we feel that it's kind of a mainstream kind of thing. But yeah, so you just one of the things I keep on reminding myself is that this isn't going to happen overnight. It is a huge change. Yeah. So sorry, I interrupted.
The pedagogy, the actual teaching of this, because it's one thing to have that content there and to have those definitions, but to think and articulate in a way that students can understand what are the things and how will they relate to my life and how can I make the connections. That pedagogy is really important, and it's nice to see that unpack there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the other thing that we don't really know a whole lot about is the pedagogy of teaching programming. So lots of people know how to program, but teaching programming is a whole new thing. Mind you, if you want to start a really long discussion, just start talking about what's the best way to teach programming. But,
to talk about my paper at the conference about the conceptual understandings that kids bring about computers to their so Paul Channel, I've done some lovely research in that, but I'm just dropping papers here.
Excellent.
And a bit of a shout out to Bruce, who's joined us from Canberra. G'day, Bruce.
Hi, Roland. Yeah, sorry I couldn't get in any earlier, but this is a topic I'm obviously very interested in, so I thought I'd make an effort as soon as I got home.
Do you think there's more that we could be doing? This week, I believe, is the Hour of Code week or Programming week, and I know I'll be celebrating that tomorrow with the Year 7 students who are coming to our school for a special incursion. I'm going to throw them into the, well, I can't say the deep end because it makes it sound like they're drowning, but into the fun end. We've actually solving some puzzles and things, doing some programming using the Hour of Code website.
Yeah, because, you know, as I said before, I think the key thing is for people just to realize what it is. I think sometimes, well, yeah, so the Hour of Code's a good example because I mean, a lot of people have never seen code, and even the name code is mysterious, right? You know, like, oh, it's a secret code or something like that. So I think to have an hour where you actually do it and see it and realize that perhaps it's not quite so strange is quite good. Of course, on the other hand, you can't learn programming in an hour. You know, it's quite complicated. So I think code at all, the whole idea is really just to get them hooked, and so that they can sort of, you know, some students will want to follow up from there, but others at least have just had a taste of it. Be interesting to sort of look back and see how influential that is in the future. And the other thing I like about what they're doing is I don't think they're actually, I mean, coding is actually like one of the least interesting jobs, right? Just like, here's what I want you to code, just code it, right? So it's, you know, designing things and getting requirements and then testing and debugging and all those kind of things are an important part of the whole process, let alone what algorithms you're going to use, what interface you're going to design, how can you, you know, do it in a way that matches the way that people think and all that sort of thing. But the Hour of Code, they do actually try and give a hook into to show students something a wee bit beyond just the actual coding, but I think they sort of quite cleverly just build on the mystery of the word code and hopefully get people involved from there.
Tim, are you putting in any mechanisms for the evolution of the field guide and the unplugged materials, other than various versions, in terms of, you talked a bit at the beginning about crowdsourcing and teacher involvement. Are there any particular mechanism you're putting into that?
Yeah, in some ways, this is a really big question for us. So it's open source, right? So, you know, if we all vaporized, if New Zealand was disconnected from the rest of the world for some reason, I know, imagine, then it's open source. Someone can grab it and keep it going and whatever. And it's, you know, so that's one of the reasons it's open source, is just so that it doesn't depend on us. People don't need to worry about it being, you know, pulling the plug or anything like that. But the other thing is that with open source software, it's very easy for people to contribute modules to a piece of software, and you know what it does and how it fits in or how it makes it better. But with a book, I mean, I've deliberately kept a reasonable amount of control over the content to try and make it fairly coherent and consistent and all that sort of thing. And so the challenge is, how do you do that in a group sourced kind of way? And that's one of our projects for next year, actually, is to take it from, we'll probably move to a slightly different support system, that it's a platform that it's running on. The one at the moment is kind of designed for open source, but we haven't actually released the raw source. You sort of have to scrape it off the website at the moment, but we could do it that way. But there's a couple of other systems coming up, and it's really new with books and book authoring, the whole idea of open source. I mean, Wikipedia is a great example of a successful open source system, or crowdsourced system, and it almost seems to hang on a knife edge about whether it works or not. But it's a matter of, yeah, how do you do that for a book? Because everyone's got the idea about what's the best examples and what's the main point I want to make. And certainly one thing we want to be able to do is have different views of the book for different countries and different curricula. At the moment, it's totally aimed at the New Zealand curriculum. Some of that, maybe a lot of it, will be useful for other curricula. Bits of it won't be relevant, and other bits need to be added. And so we want to try and have it so that you can choose which modules you use and then put in your own modules somehow as well. So that's actually a challenge for the future. How do you make that easy for people to do and to contribute? At the moment, we're happy just to actually have most of it there. And you know, we feel we're about halfway there. You know, in terms of content. But so yeah, that's one of the challenges. How do you get it crowdsourced? How do you get everyone contributing?
I did have a question about the open source aspect in terms of the copyright material that presumably you've got permission, particularly the cartoons. They always seem to cause difficulties getting the OK to use.
Yeah.
Have you gathered permission from the various materials to other people to use further on, or is it just for yourself to use in this particular version of the text?
Right. With cartoons, for example, there's only the only commercial, well, the only pre-existing ones that we have are from XKCD, and XKCD is freely available. Well, you know, with a license that can be used in this kind of way, so that can be reused by other people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The and then the other cartoons that are in there, we've just paid to have someone draw them. So I've got a local computer science grad who's also a cartoonist, so that's quite handy. So yeah, we're really big on making sure that everything, including the videos that are in there, are available for people to reuse. It's a share-alike license. So, I mean, at some stage we have to go through and do a very careful audit because it's been written by so many people. I always want to be sure that we can say absolutely anything in there can be used. But it's all the interactives. So there's one or two that we've got permission to use, but again, they're ones that people make available freely. So you know, if you decided you wanted to host the whole thing separately, I think everything that's in there you would automatically have permission to use anyway from the people that produce it.
So you've said you're kind of halfway there at the moment. What will it look like when you're all the way there or closer, because you probably will move the goalposts every moment as well. So how will it look with teachers and students and those curriculum and political structures and all of that as well?
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry, you say you do. Well, I mean, I was kind of talking about the field guide to some extent, which at the moment it contains what you need, but like it's huge, great long pages of text and things that need breaking up with video and extra, cool stuff and cartoons and things like that. But beyond that, I think it's when we've got the subject supported officially, through government channels and so on, and where people actually know that it is separate from e-learning, or it's separate from learning to use a computer, that sort of thing, and it's sort of funded separately and supported separately. That will certainly make a big difference. But we're kind of forcing that from the ground up anyway. The demand is coming from the teachers, and that's pretty hard to resist, really, within schools and outside the schools. Yeah.
So do you think it will lead to a situation where you can get an endorsed curriculum from primary through to secondary?
That is the end game, yep. I mean, one of the things that when we've been working with primary is looking at what age should kids actually get exposed to this. And it turns out the age of 12 is really important, and a lot of teachers probably know this anyway. Before 12, kids are wide-eyed. Gender isn't a big issue with all these things. The girls will have a go at programming, the boys will have a go, all that sort of stuff. And kids form their view of what they're good at before that age. I mean, it doesn't apply to everyone, but in general, after that age, it's sort of the hormones that are a bit more important, and it's what the opposite gender think of you, and what your friends will think of you, and that sort of thing. So if you've formed that image, before you hit that, then that makes a big difference. And so it doesn't need to be a whole lot, but I think if kids are exposed to it a bit and they get a taste for it, those that like it, those that don't like it, they can find out that actually maybe it's not as interesting as they thought it might have been. That's fine. And so in some ways, that's why the Australian curriculum, I think, was quite exciting. Hopefully will be quite exciting. I think it's just getting a few speed wobbles there at the moment, but it's looking hopeful. And so, I mean, it's, again, it probably doesn't need to be too heavy, but it's just enough to get kids excited. And I think the main thing is not to get too wound up with, like, we have to teach absolutely everything, and what if they don't know binary numbers by the age of 8 or something like that. but just rather than let's have fun with binary numbers while they're at primary school, let's explore a little bit of programming and stuff, and just find out what they're interested. Let them find out what they're interested in.
You said binary was fun?
Oh yeah.
Come on, man. 10 types of people in the world that know binary.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned this training curriculum, and it's not actually a speed wobble. It's more like I'd say like an air pocket, because the actual curriculum is actually quite good, and it's flying along its stratospheric layers. It's usually when we come across the vacuous lack of understanding by some of the people in the landscape we've been flying over that it has to sort of drop down to increase the lift that's necessary to keep it flying. I like the suggestion too, Tim, that we've got to engage kids with this. If we just run it as some sort of senior school elective, they'll miss the opportunity to find that there's maybe some passion, some interest, a burning desire to learn more, or even just an understanding of what computers are good at doing. And that needs to happen at the younger levels when they can have a chance to explore that language. I like the suggestion of maybe year 12, you can begin to build that. But even if there's a sense of fun and play at the primary school level, where it can be woven into a much wider curriculum.
Yeah, actually, and just regarding the whole fun thing, I don't know if you've come across the show that we developed. I'll just digging out the URL for it here. Whoa, okay, that was it. And so basically, one of the things that we were doing when this Unplugged thing was more for outreach than for teaching. In fact, it was only for outreach, not for actually trying to teach. Is this show, which it's a 1 hour sort of. It was oh gosh, probably 15 years ago. I was asking myself, well, we have all these physics shows where they blow up balloons and freeze bananas and all that sort of stuff. What's the computer science equivalent? So we put together the show that is just an hour of fun, and the main message really was that I'm a young kid, and it was aimed at primary school kids. I've hung out doing computer science for an hour, and it was kind of interesting and fun, and we had a laugh, and I can't remember what it was, but there was binary numbers in there and all that sort of stuff. And so if you're wondering how to do binary numbers in a way that's a bit of a hoot, then have a look at the video. It's the way that we did this particular one is that I've been doing the show for quite a while, and basically I got 2 of our grad students who are also actors. They're quite good. And I did the show with one of them, and then I got them to do it together, and then they did it. So we brought in a fresh bunch of kids each time, and so the video is just the 3rd time that they did it as a pair, sort of improvising, but using a bunch of ideas from computer science. Now, in the classroom, it's not going to be a laugh a minute for an hour on end. It's actually, there's a few more goals that have to be achieved and so on. But there's certainly plenty of opportunities to bring some of these things to life in a way that is engaging and memorable and so on.
I'm just conscious of the time tonight, and I know we've got a very patient audience who's been listening. I think a shout out to Paula, who I notice has been putting some suggestions in the background too. Thank you, and good to see you listening in. I wonder too if we could perhaps talk a little bit about some of the things we're going from tonight's show, and starting with perhaps Bruce, Jason, and Tim, and then Amanda and I can close this in thought. So some closing reflections, where you'd like to see us heading with this, and perhaps what you've learned tonight.
And Bruce, you don't have to recap the whole show, obviously.
Well, that's going to be a little tough coming in as late as I did. Look, one of the things I was really interested to hear, and I kind of caught a little bit of it just before I dropped in, was this sort of whole position of kids being exposed to this stuff much earlier on in their education. And as someone who's just come back from a graduation tonight and is dealing with kids who are in year 11 and 12 all the time, one of the common things I hear from students is it's so much harder to do IT at senior secondary level. I'm much better off just doing more English or history or something that I know because it's easier to get good marks. And that's a real shame from my perspective. So anything that we can do to get kids engaging with this material at a younger age, I think will have huge benefit at the senior secondary level, because it won't be as new, it won't be as hard. I think it'll be much, much easier for us to retain kids then, because they'll at least know what they're in for and they'll have seen it before. So that's a big shock, and it's something that I think has been really obvious to me teaching at the senior levels.
Thanks, Bruce. Jason.
Yes, I'm just glad that there are people like Tim and countries like New Zealand that are trying to tackle and do something comprehensive around this, because there's so much fragmentation in the resources that are now available. I think particularly in the area of programming and so forth, it becomes overwhelming to many teachers, and the idea of having these consolidated collections start providing the core for an actual curriculum that teachers can actually then use and structure into a process that they can engage with. I see so much of the material out there at the moment is great to get kids started, but doesn't take them through in a more comprehensive way. And these resources, I think, will eventually evolve into something that can do that.
Thank you, Jason. And Tim.
Yeah. I think, I mean, for me, the number one takeaway that I've had from the last few years' experience is that you just got to look after teachers. Teachers are the linchpin. It's all about teachers. They, in the end, decide exactly what a student experiences in the class. Certainly in New Zealand, and I suspect in Australia, they're the ones that, if it's going to happen, they're going to make it happen. And if they don't want it to happen, it won't happen. And so it's all about looking after the teachers. And part of that is, of course, what's the motivation for them? And teachers are there mainly because they care about kids. I don't think there's many there that don't care about kids. It's kind of not a good pay for something that you might not enjoy doing. And so the thing to motivate them is, how will your kids be better off if you do this kind of thing? And if they can see that, then that's where it all comes together.
I'm a bit of a feral educator. I enjoy different pedagogies and teaching styles, and I've particularly enjoyed pushing some of the boundaries. I'm teaching STEM subjects. It's quite interesting, but when you sort of add the A for the arts, and you get all sorts of interesting things. And I think you've made it really creative tonight by introducing some humour and some different ideas. And I think an authentic student voice and creation, that's really wonderful. And I think that's something I've sometimes missed when I'm sitting at the front and sprouting my wisdom and knowledge. You're probably picking up some of my friends here, these two lads, and I've got a whole bag of them here in my next to me. They help teach some of the IT issues and things, and he's been all the way. He was actually being held at one stage by the policy writer of the White House during the Bush administration at a workshop. Sort of left him alone and very strangely looked at him. And this one over here, I could put him back in my daughter's bedroom. But it's important for me because what you've done is made it seem relevant, made it seem reachable, and I'm hoping that teachers have a chance to have a look back at this recording, think about the kind of things that are happening, have a look at the website, and engage with some of those strategies in the classroom. We've adapted some of it in Australia. We look forward at sharing some of the great ideas you're doing, and Tim, I hope this is the start of a long-term relationship and friendship across the ditch, and being able to build and adapt and learn and grow with it. And thank you for sharing it with us tonight.
Yeah, no, it's a real pleasure, and you know, our two countries, we often sort of spar off each other, and I think the more successful you are with this, the more successful we can convince our government they need to be, and vice versa. So it probably doesn't hurt for us each to be pushing things along.
It's almost like we've both got part of the pieces. We just need to put them together. We have the structured curriculum from the top, if it's endorsed, and you guys have that groundswell and culture, which is really awesome. In fact, that was my favourite part of listening to what you were sharing tonight, was the way that you've been inspiring teachers and working with them, and they're really owning the computer science-ness of what they're teaching to their students as well, and that's obviously rubbing off on the students a lot. So I'm hoping that over the years we'll see a lot more New Zealand programmers and computer scientists actually with that passion for making a real difference in the world. So well done, and I'm sure we'll stay tuned, and I'm probably going to be using quite a few of those resources in the future. And next week we have another ACCELN broadcast. It's going to be our last for Series 4, so we'll have 30 all up. Yes, 30 or so hours plus of these shows this year. Very exciting. We're going to have an open mic session, and we're going to be using the ACCE Learning Network community on Google Doc to help Google Plus, not Google Docs, to help us pick a topic. So it's your community, your voice, your microphone, and we invite people to let us know if they'd like to be part of that session. And you can check out the ACCELN homepage, which is acceln.wikispaces.com. We'll add more information and start an event for the next broadcast, our last one for the year, over the next couple of days.
One does not just listen to the ACCE homepage. One engages and shares and distributes. I didn't quite say that right. Should ask Tim probably to read that out. It's been wonderful seeing you.
And you'll be the only one.
Well, we know that New Zealand is actually Middle Earth, and it's the middle of knowledge, and it's also just at the edge of the international date line. So, Tim, jump in that canoe, and you can extend your... I really appreciate you taking the time and trouble, mate. All the best, and look forward to your next episode. Bye.